Trois du règlement, nous poursuivons l'étude.
We are going to continue the study on the roadmap and immigration in Francophone minority communities. Today, we're happy to have with us Ahmed Hussein, who is Minister of Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship. Welcome, Ahmed. And also from the Department of Citizenship and Immigration, we have Dan Manicon, Assistant Deputy Minister, Corinne Prince, Director General, Joël Denis, Director, and Holly Flowers Code, Chief HR Officer. So welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Official Languages Committee.
And you will have, vous avez 10 minutes pour faire votre présentation. Et ensuite, comme d'habitude, on va passer.
And then we'll do questions around the table. There'll be questions and comments. So, Minister, we're listening. The floor is yours. Thank you, Chair. I'm very happy to appear before your committee today to discuss about the link between the immigration initiatives of our government and official languages.
And I'll be then happy to take questions after that. As the committee members likely know, in late 2017, our government announced a plan to pursue the most ambitious immigration levels in Canadian history, because we know that immigration positively contributes to both the Canadian economy and our society. We have a plan to steadily increase our immigration levels. Ce plan comprend.
This plan includes specific efforts in terms of Francophone immigration, which plays an important role in the future of Canada. Therefore, our government plans to help increase and support Francophone populations outside of Quebec by contributing to French immigration and by taking measures to encourage it and foster it.
Working towards achieving the target of 4.4% Francophone migration by 2023. Pour donner suite.
To achieve this target, we have already made modifications to the programs for French-speaking immigrants.
IRCC adjusted the express entry system to make it easier for all temporary foreign workers and international students to become permanent residents. We expect French-speaking immigrants to benefit from these changes. In 2017, to increase the proportion of French-speaking immigrants coming to Canada through economic programs, we awarded additional points under the express entry system to immigration applicants with strong proficiency in French. We're already seeing positive trends resulting from these changes, even though it's been a very short period of time since these changes have been implemented. The number of French speakers, therefore, invited to apply to come to Canada under the express entry system has now doubled. That is a huge achievement because of that change to express entry. In 2016, we also introduced the Mobilité Francophone system, which helps employers outside of Quebec hire French-speaking workers from abroad to undertake skilled work. And in exchange of taking a chance on that worker, they get a break on the labor market impact assessment. In 2017, we adjusted this stream to facilitate the recruitment of even more French-speaking temporary workers. De plus, nous avons
Moreover, we continued our efforts to promote and to recruit Francophones to sell Canada as a destination of choice for French-speaking immigrants. This includes participation in targeted initiatives such as Destination Canada events, which is quite effective in Europe. And we also participate in other events, similar events in Europe and in Africa.
This year, the Minister of Canadian Heritage introduced our government's overall action plan for official languages 2018 to 2023. As part of this plan, Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship Canada is committed to support the vitality of Francophone minority communities. I'm pleased to also highlight that Budget 2018 allocated $40.8 million in new funding over 5 years to IRCC. IRCC compte consolider.
IRCC would like to consolidate what we call the Francophone integration path in official language communities that are in minority settings. And we would like to strengthen cooperation and responsibility within the department.
Integration pathway will entail the following: strengthening connections between French-speaking immigrants, improving the provision of Francophone settlement services, and building the capacity of the Francophone settlement service sector. This initiative will help French-speaking newcomers to obtain the information that they need regarding Francophone communities and services from Francophone settlement organizations. To accomplish this, it will cover the entire integration spectrum, from pre-arrival all the way to citizenship. Je suis ravi de souligner.
I'm very pleased to underscore that part of this Francophone integration pathway includes strengthening the presence of Francophone service providers in key international airports in Canada. We will be starting with Pearson International Airports, which is a key entry point in Canada.
To increase the availability and the accessibility of French language training that is adapted to the needs of French-speaking immigrants. For example, it'll expand online learning tools so that French-speaking newcomers can access the learning opportunities they need to achieve their unique settlement goals. De plus, nous augmentons.
Moreover, we're making professional training in French more available for Francophone establishment service providers, and this includes a network that coordinates services. We have 13 of these networks throughout the country in every province and territory, with the exception of Quebec and Nunavut.
Integration pathway announced in the Federal Action Plan is a new initiative called Welcoming Francophone Communities. This will help targeted communities to improve their capacity to help French-speaking newcomers integrate and remain in these communities via enhanced services and programs. We're also aiming to increase the availability of French language tests at a lower cost. Currently, we're working with independent language testing organizations to provide these services to potential economic immigrants. And finally, we plan to improve the coordination of Francophone immigration services at IRCC itself, with increased horizontal policy engagement and the creation of a Francophone immigration policy hub within IRCC. This hub will reinforce the capacity of the department to review and revise activities in relation to Francophone immigration. Monsieur le Président,
Chair, at IRCC, we're cooperating with several partners, including provinces, territories, and Francophone communities, in order to establish a new global Francophone immigration strategy. We are going to improve the coherence of our activities, which are intended to support newcomers to Canada who speak French, and we are going to contribute to the achievement of the targets we have set for Francophone immigration outside of Quebec. These measures will also accompany our plan to strengthen our accountability measures and our performance measures and our ability to evaluate the effect of the measures that the department has made for official languages.
And territorial ministers responsible for immigration and the Canadian Francophonie in Toronto at the second forum on Francophone immigration. This was an opportunity to discuss initiatives that encourage Francophone immigrants to settle in Francophone minority communities in Canada outside of Quebec, and which will help these immigrants to remain in these communities. Ministers in attendance endorsed the first ever federal, provincial, territorial action plan for increased Francophone immigration outside of Quebec. This plan outlines concrete actions that our different jurisdictions can take. These include promoting awareness of Francophone immigration opportunities, immigration pathways and settlement, services to prospective French-speaking immigrants and applicants, increasing employer engagement in French-speaking immigrant recruitment and employment, increasing the availability, awareness, and accessibility of French language services, and finally supporting diverse and inclusive Francophone communities. By pursuing these initiatives, this plan will contribute to an increase in the number of French-speaking immigrants settling in Canada outside of Quebec. The participation rate of French-speaking immigrants in local labor markets is also set to increase. What will also increase is the participation rate of French-speaking immigrants in broader communities and social networks. I should add that following the FPT Forum, a symposium bringing together governments and community organizations was held on March 22nd this year in Calgary. This event laid the foundation for potential collaboration between governments and communities to strengthen Francophone immigration to Canada, including the FPT Action Plan. Before closing, Mr. Chair, I should note that recently I joined the Honourable Laura Albanese, Ontario Minister of Citizenship and Immigration, to sign 3 new annexes to the Canada-Ontario Immigration Agreement. One of these annexes was the French-speaking Immigrant Annex, which will help Canada and Ontario identify opportunities to increase the number of French-speaking immigrants coming to Canada and Ontario. I had previously signed a similar annex with my counterpart in New Brunswick. This is just one of the ways in which the federal and provincial governments are working together to maximize the economic, social, and cultural benefits of immigration. Mr. Chair, to this end, our priority on increasing Francophone immigration outside of Quebec will help address these challenges and support the vitality of our Francophone communities. Our government recognizes that the bilingual nature of Canada reinforces both our society and our economy. While we have work to do to reach this goal, we will continue to make significant progress that supports French-speaking immigrants. Grâce aux nouvelles
Thanks to these new initiatives established in the Action Plan for Official Languages, we are directly financing, providing funds to Francophone communities in minority settings. And this strengthens their ability to integrate and to retain French-speaking immigrants. We would like all communities throughout Canada to benefit from immigration, and we want to encourage immigrants who speak French to establish themselves in all communities throughout our country. Thank you very much, Chair. We'd now be happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you very much, Minister. Now we're going to move immediate to questions and comments from members. And now we'll ask Mr. Genereux to start. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Minister, for being with us today. At the House, you can accuse the Conservatives for a lack of compassion. In my opinion, personally, compassion cannot be attributed to an amount of money. Do you believe this is true?
I comment with respect to what I felt was the record of the Conservative Party when they were in government. I felt that cutting refugee health care to refugee claimants, which is a practice that the federal courts called cruel and unusual treatment, is something that demonstrated a lack of compassion for refugees, and that is why I made those comments. They were not a personal attack in nature, but a comment on the policies of the previous conservative government with respect to refugees.
Monsieur le ministre, j'étais
Minister, I was part of that government at the time, and we learned at the time throughout the department and throughout the government, out of necessity, we had to act, and it wasn't out of lack of compassion. And I was offended this afternoon when you talked about a lack of compassion, because we had to cut funds in certain places. But this is unacceptable. I read your 8-page plan about Francophone immigration in Canada, and I have a question. And you were in Montreal this morning. And in terms of the large number of irregular immigration, illegal immigrants going over the border in Quebec, a lot of them come from Nigeria, and many of them were Anglophones. They speak, obviously, English much more than French, more than 95% of them, versus only 5% of them being Francophone. So what do you plan to do with these asylum seekers who have crossed the border since last year? Because we went from more than 20,000 last year to a much higher level now. So what do you plan to do? Because we all know that inevitably many of them will come to Canada and stay here, and they'll have to choose a place to live. And most of them speak English, so it won't improve the percentage of Francophones that we'll see in other provinces.
On the issue of irregular migration, we've been seized with this issue from the very beginning. We work very closely with the province of Quebec and Ontario and Manitoba and any other province that's affected by this. We have an intergovernmental task force on irregular migration that meets frequently. We have a very vigorous and strong outreach program by members of parliament, but also by our Canadian embassy in the United States, as well as our 12 consulates all over the United States. In addition to that, we have ensured as a government that each and every individual that irregularly crosses our border is arrested, is apprehended, undergoes very rigorous criminal, health, and background checks. And if anybody presents a threat to Canadian society, they're immediately detained, and they don't actually get to make a claim. In terms of what we're doing beyond that, we've been working, as I said, very closely with provinces to ensure that the federal government is responsive to their concerns with respect to the effects that that asylum seekers would have on their provincial social services. But our priority remains working very closely with the United States on outreach, on addressing issues related to the border, and that work continues to be expressed in various different ways, from outreach, from interdiction, from providing the necessary resources for more border security operations and more money for the Immigration Refugee Board.
On sait, Monsieur le Ministre, que suite au tweet du Premier ministre,
Minister, we know that following the tweets from the Prime Minister that everyone was welcome to come to Canada, you'll understand that in the report I heard this morning that it's my understanding that you'll be going to Nigeria yourself. Can you tell us which countries you're going and what's going to be said to residents of other countries who go through the United States and to get the visas that way?
Last year, the makeup of the nationalities who were coming irregularly across the border tended to be mainly Haitian nationals and other TPS-affected populations. We therefore ensured that we had outreach directly to those communities in the United States. We clarified a lot of the misinformation they were receiving about our immigration system. And we made it clear that coming to Canada irregularly is not a solution to your problems, that you have to actually have a
même et votre Premier ministre qui avait créé ce problème.
And your Prime Minister is the one that created this problem. We didn't have that problem in 2016. In 2016, there were far fewer irregular crossings. And the Prime Minister has 4.3 million followers on Twitter. So given that the department made warnings, and I think it's a good thing that you did that because warnings are warranted, but the Prime Minister should do the same thing and emulate you with his tweets and make the same kind of recommendations to all those folks trying to enter Canada in this manner.
Of course, and that's because I think you're mistaking the Prime Minister's stating of a fact that we in Canada offer protection to people who are fleeing war, persecution, and terrorism, that we have a commitment to our international obligations, that we will provide refuge to those who are seeking refuge. Having said that, that is not the same thing as saying that, that we agree or concur with people crossing our borders irregularly. The Prime Minister and all the ministers, as well as members of Parliament from our side, have said it very clearly that we do not condone people crossing our borders irregularly. We've taken action to address that, and I can point to many things that we've done, including extra funding to make sure that refugee claimants are processed faster so that those who have legitimate claims can stay in the country and those who do not can be removed faster.
Merci beaucoup, Bernard. Dan Vandal.
Thank you very much, Bernard.
Merci beaucoup pour votre présentation.
Thank you very much for your presentation. My first question has to do with retaining Francophone immigrants in minority official language communities such as Saint-Boniface, Saint-Vital. One of our misgivings following the arrival of a good many immigrants who are leaving our communities. It's an exodus to big Francophone metropolises, and they end up becoming part of the Anglophone communities. Does your department or has it launched any programs in order to remedy this problem, to ensure that newcomers actually remain in minority official language communities?
Yes. Very important question, because it's not just a question of attracting French-speaking immigrants to contribute to the vitality of French language communities, but also retaining them there so that we don't lose them to secondary migration. And according to IRCC's evaluation of the Immigration to Official Languages Minority Communities Initiative, communities outside of Quebec gained more French-speaking principal applicants from Quebec than they lost between 2003 to 2014. But that's not enough. As I said, in March of this year, March 2nd, ministers responsible for immigration and La Francophonie endorsed a federal, provincial, territorial action plan for increased Francophone immigration outside of Quebec. This plan will target areas of collaboration, including accessibility of services in French. This is really important. And the development of inclusive Francophone minority communities in order to retain newcomers. So having the facilities and the capacity and the critical mass of newcomers in a particular community so that they can be retained through the provision of those services, but also providing the services in French to attract them in the first place. So a lot is being done. There's money to make sure that we make those investments, and also horizontal policy coordination within the department through the Francophone Immigration Hub within IRCC will certainly help in that regard.
Okay, thank you. Oftentimes, universities such as the one in my riding, University of St. Boniface, have a high number of Francophone foreign students. But very similar problem. The trend has been that when the students go back home after graduation, is there anything the government or your department is doing to make it easier for students who to remain in Canada, who want to remain in Canada, to do so? And is there any specific strategies for minority language communities?
Very important question, because I think you and I agree that at the end of the day, international students make one of the best groups to become future citizens. They're young, they speak English or French, they have studied in our institutions, they're keen, so why would we not want them to stay? So, you'll be happy to note that we're the first government in Canadian history that goes around the world my predecessor and I, we go and as we recruit international students and we outreach to them to come and study in Canada, we don't just say come and study. We say come and study, and if you'd like to stay, we want you to stay. We deliberately send that signal. And we have made it easier for them to stay by various means. One, we've made changes to the express entry system to give more points to international students. And you can see the successful applicants under the express entry system, the percentage of international students has grown. Secondly, we have given more points to French language speakers under the express entry system. So combined with those two, when you have an international student who demonstrates strong French language skills, they have a much higher odds of now getting picked up by the express entry system as opposed to before. So those changes are having an impact. And as I said in my speech, already the changes that we've made under the express entry system to give more points to Francophone applicants has already doubled the number of successful people who have come through that system. That's very encouraging. So we need to do more, but we've already done a lot.
Merci.
Thank you.
Oui, merci, Monsieur le Ministre.
Thank you, Minister. And to begin with, I'd like to commend you on your French. It's been a fast learning curve, and you've improved markedly. Secondly, Francophone immigration is crucial for the survival and vitality of these communities. Now, if we don't want to encourage undue assimilation. How much time do I have, Mr. Chair? 2 minutes? You have 20 seconds left, and then you'll have another turn, another kick at the can. So perhaps we should move on to the next questioner. But I think the minister's here for 2 hours, isn't he? 10 seconds left? Well, the minister will be there. Francois. I'm glad to hear that the minister will be here for the full 2 hours. No, that's not in fact what we said. The minister will be prepared to stay and respond to however many questions we have for him. Now, as far as your action plan to increase immigration, the FTP plan, the communities aren't included in the title, and we'd like to see the communities included in the title because they're at the crux of the whole issue. And what's lacking in the plan, and what the communities have told me, is that there is no timelines. There's no timelines as to what the outcome should be, and I think that needs to be improved. And as far as allocating the money is concerned, you said that there was fresh money for immigration, the Francophone immigration pathway, 26.5, accountability, and then Francophone initiatives, 9.5 million, which was already earmarked. So the communities are wondering what proportion of those funds will go directly to the grassroots community organisations, as opposed to, how should I put it, that'll go out to those grassroots communities.
And also pass it on to my officials so that they can provide more context. I think that it's important to note the $40.8 million from the budget allocated in new funding to IRCC precisely for Francophone immigration. I spoke about the FPT forum, but also the symposium that brought together governments and community organizations so that we can have a platform and a forum to strengthen Francophone immigration to Canada, including through the FPT action plan. And most importantly, David Manicom will provide a further breakdown of some of the monies that you're talking about.
Oui, monsieur. À propos de
Yes, in response to your question, the proportion of funding that will go directly to the communities. Out of this $40 million, there is $36 million that's been earmarked for integration programs in the service providers in the community. Thank you very much, Mr. Manicom. Now, as far as these service providers are concerned, the president of the CFCA mentioned, and I quote, "We hope that these investments will be targeted directly to our community groups so that we can build their capacity. We have to stop developing bilingual problems." And by that I mean Anglophone institutions that hire one single Francophone and say, "Oh, look, we have a Francophone bilingual program." What would you respond to him?
Your concerns, it's something that we've heard very loud and clear from the stakeholders, including that organization. And whenever we can ensure that Francophone settlement services are provided by Francophone settlement organizations, we support that. And whatever we can do as a federal government, not only to provide programming money, but also to help in the capacity of those organizations to deliver those services, we're more than open to doing so. You heard in my speech, I spoke about the importance of that first step, that first handoff, where a Francophone immigrant and their family are landing at an airport and should be received by a Francophone settlement organization and not by an organization that has one Francophone employer. So we agree with that approach. The question is, how do we put that in policy into effect? What monies are available to redirect to that? And what else can we do in terms of our allocation for settlement and integration to ensure that Francophone immigrants and newcomers receive Francophone-specific settlement services from a Francophone settlement organization?
Merci, Monsieur le Ministre. J'ai une autre question pour vous.
Thank you, Minister. I have another question for you. In BC and Yukon in 2015, there was a national conference on settlement and integration that was hosted by IRCC. There was a report from the Official Languages Commissioner at the time stating that that meeting was conducted almost entirely in English, with documents almost entirely in English. In 2017, or 2018 rather, 26th to the 28th of March, once again, in Red Deer, it was a national conference on settlement and integration. Everything was in English, Minister. Just take a look. I can show you, the proof is in the pudding. The Francophone associations that attended this conference left frustrated, and they felt they weren't respected at all. What can you do to ensure that this never happens again? I'm sure that you're doing good things in terms of Francophone immigration, but when you provide services and a consultative process, you need to respect Francophones at the core.
I share your frustration with respect to how the Francophone participants at that meeting felt seeing products only in English. I share your frustration and I understand.
Est-ce que vous allez mettre des mesures en place pour ne pas que ça se reproduise?
What are you going to do to make sure it doesn't happen again?
Prince answer.
Merci.
Thank you. As far as the complaints before the Official Languages Commissioner is concerned, there are discussions underway with the Commissioner's office and our department. We are cooperating fully with the Official Languages Commissioner's office. And moreover, as the Minister stated in his speech, we have implemented a Francophone hub in our department. And we are working with all departmental officials and employees, public servants, to ensure not only that there are services in both official languages, especially when it comes to conferences, but also within the department itself. Question, René Arsenault. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I too, Minister, would like to commend you on your ongoing efforts and the fact that you, to the greatest extent possible, you try to speak in French. hats off. About a year ago, Minister, there were folks from the Immigration Department that appeared before us, and it's at that point that we understood just how difficult it was to recruit Francophone immigrants. And I think parties of all stripes here today were saddened and disappointed that the goal was 4.4% and that we were barely reaching the threshold of 2%. And it's as if that it was just the status quo was being accepted. But there was a French-Canadian and Acadian, 12 generations on how hard it was to hear that reaching a 2% goal, even a 4.4% goal, was so hard. And we were told that there were funding problems for the cultural departments, etc. And in your opening remarks, and I'd congratulate you on that, the consultative process with the Department of Finance, $40.8 million, and Minister Joly's department will help to meet our concerns. And I hope that that will work out as it should. Now, I'd now refer you to page 31 of the infamous action plan, page 31, that states, Minister, that we are going to strengthen refugee immigration coordination and with Citizenship Canada by creating a public policy centre for Francophone immigration policy. So here's my question. How will this public policy Francophone Immigration Centre, what will it look like? Are we talking about a sub-department, a parallel department with officials who are specialists in Francophone immigration?
The issue of increasing the numbers is multifaceted. We have to consider it from the perspective of more money, more funding, adequate funding, targeted money for capacity of French language, Francophone settlement organizations, making sure that that there's better outreach and marketing, and not just targeting the usual countries that we have targeted in the past, but looking beyond France and Belgium and targeting other countries as well, making sure that the outreach is more focused, for example. So instead of going there and outreaching and marketing Canada to the whole population of a certain country, maybe in addition to that, having groups of employers leaving here, being taken as part of a delegation and having a job fair to target specific skilled French-speaking immigrants in certain countries so that you make those connections and they can come back and work and move their families. In terms of the hub, I will let Korean Prince speak to you a little bit in more detail on that.
As the Minister mentioned in his speech, we have created a policy focus, a Francophone immigration hub in the settlement and integration sector, and particularly in the settlement and integration policy branch, which I manage. And the objective there is to ensure that whether we're working with Francophone service provider organizations across the country, whether we're working with our provincial and territorial colleagues, whether we're working with employers to attempt to convince employers of the benefits of hiring bilingual newcomers, as well as within our span of programming from promotion and recruitment to selection, integration, retention, and targeted outcomes. We want to ensure we're doing all of that work in a coordinated way, that the left hand knows what the right hand is doing, and that is the reason that we've put in place this Francophone hub in the department.
Oui, merci, Madame Prince. C'est parce que en matière d'immigration.
Thank you, Ms. Prince. In terms of Francophone immigration outside of Quebec, we're behind. There were negative figures in relation to the targets. There's a lot of work to be done. My specific question, Ms. Prince, is that I think you were here a year ago. I think it was you. And we suggested the possibility or the hypothesis that perhaps it would be more practical and effective to have a Francophone department that would just do Francophone immigration. Do I understand that this is what we've got with this hub here? You're trying to strengthen coordination with a public policy immigration hub? I will answer the question. I'm the Assistant Deputy Minister responsible for Ms. Prince's branch. We have people in the department that are working in this field. We have colleagues in policies and operations, and we're going to strengthen our efforts. And now we have dedicated personnel to do a continuous link. For example, when we meet with members of the community and employers, we have employees whose sole role is to do coordination with these companies and to recruit, not just with Paris, but also in Brussels and Mexico and many other countries. So we have specific personnel that creates links with provinces and territories, communities worldwide. In our opinion, this is the most efficient model to do so. Now, someone who's been waiting quite a while, our colleague, Mr. Sanson. Thank you very much, Mr. Minister, for your presentation and for your colleagues for being here. I feel really good today because 2 years ago and last year, there were many places, as my colleagues have stated, where there were major lacks or gaps. I like what you're doing. You have a multilateral approach, a multi-pronged approach, because there are serious problems on the ground. And when I say multi-pronged approach, I'm talking about, well, I'm trying to imagine a meeting between the immigration ministers of the provinces and the federal minister for immigration. This is a major accomplishment, and we have to underscore it. So what happened after? There were agreements that are now being created and signed with Ontario, as you've just mentioned, and other provinces as well, such as New Brunswick. And we hope there'll be others as well that will move forward. I know that Nova Scotia is also quite interested in an agreement as well. But when we're talking about issues and solutions with these provinces, and when the provinces realize that the federal government is really focused on increasing and improving the number of francophones, this is important. And the third point, the most important, is the hub. That was the second issue we mentioned last year, and my colleague mentioned it. I'd like to go a bit further on that point. And the third point is the Welcoming Francophone Community Initiative. I know in Toronto you have this. And are we going to target other provinces as well? Will they have this service there? I'm thinking about Pier 21 in Nova Scotia or other provinces. So my question is, what are we doing for the Welcoming Francophone Community Initiative in other provinces, which is crucial? And then your colleague mentioned, Deputy Minister, that there are people on the ground throughout the world that are taking efforts to improve things. Were these people in place 2 years ago? If so, we weren't aware of that. And so what will be different this time to achieve our target? Thank you.
Start the answer and then allow Mr. Manicom to complete it. Very important question. I want to begin with the annexes. So the two annexes to the agreements that we've signed with Ontario and with New Brunswick are dedicated towards Francophone immigration. So as part of our immigration agreements, we have bound ourselves between the federal government and Ontario and New Brunswick to work on Francophone immigration. That means, for example, sharing profile data with Ontario so that they can harvest some of the federal applicants who are destined to go to Quebec, to Ontario, who are Francophones, but are not aware of Francophone welcoming communities. So how can Ontario benefit from that? How can we coordinate on matching our targets so that we both achieve them? And how can we work together on the marketing? Like I said, the moving equally, not just on general outreach, but also making sure that we have targeted outreach to take advantage of things like Mobilité Francophone, so that we can take Canadian employers who are willing to hire Francophone skilled workers, take them and match them with the populations in places like Morocco who have segments of the population who are young and who have highly skilled, high skills that are in much need by these employers. The last thing I'll say is the Atlantic Immigration Pilot Program, because you mentioned New Brunswick, it also presents an opportunity for all those 4 provinces to use that program to attract and retain Francophone immigrants. So, for example, New Brunswick is using its Atlantic Immigration Pilot Program number to make sure that it adds to its target of making sure that it shores up its the vitality of its Francophone community. Nothing stops New Brunswick from doing the same thing. Our initiative in Atlantic Canada to announce a program called Study and Stay, which enables international students in Atlantic Canada to stay and become permanent residents after graduation, will also help provinces like New Brunswick and Nova Scotia to keep more Francophone students in the province beyond their studies as permanent residents. In terms of what is happening now in some of the international offices as opposed to before, Mr. Manicom can.
Yeah, just to finish though, Minister, retaining immigrants, it's work.
Yes.
So one piece is to l'accueil, the other one is integrate, but the third one is work. If they don't work, they don't stay. Monsieur le Ministre, merci, Monsieur le Ministre.
Thank you very much, Minister and Assistant Deputy Minister. I just wanted to add that this is a nonpartisan issue. With previous governments, both Liberal and Conservative, they did not achieve any success. And now what has changed is that we've decided that instead of choosing between selection tools or retention tools, we've decided to do all 3 things at once. So the express entry system is the biggest change we've made to our Francophone immigration policy in Canada, and it's working. And we've seen a great amount of money that is now available in communities to try and build a path of integration for and by Francophones. So it allows us to retain them. And for the first time, we have a partnership with the provinces with true targets. 33%, that's the target for New Brunswick for their new program. 5% is the target for Ontario. So together with the federal program, where we've seen the figure doubled, for the first time, we can see a possibility for success. Thank you very much, Daryl. And now we're going to move on to the next questioner, Mr. Bernier. Thank you very much. Thank you, Minister, for being with us today. I have a few questions. I hope you'll be able to have answer them. Otherwise, you can send them to the committee afterwards by in writing. We learned today that there are more than 26 million immigrants that went over the border legally last year. What was the cost to the Canadian government to deal with these asylum seekers? 26,000, rather. 26,000. Yes, 26,000.
For these 26,000 people who cross illegally the border, do you have what was the cost for the federal government?
There's the costs incurred by the federal government to process them at the border, and then there's downstream costs incurred by provinces with respect to social housing and so on. So
do you have any numbers?
I don't know which costs you're referring to.
Both.
Okay. I'm sure I don't have them with me, but I'm sure we can get them to you.
Et aussi, nous avons appris.
Also, we learned that there's roughly 1% of these 26,000 individuals that were sent back to their country of origin. So roughly 260 people out of 26,000 were sent back to their country of origin. I would like to know, in terms of the others who stayed, you said roughly 90% of these people were irregular or illegal migrants, regardless of what you call them. Maxine, I just want to state that if you have to make sure your question relates to Francophonie. Yes, I'd like to know, in terms of this 1% that was sent back to their country, what percentage do you expect to be sent back in the future? Will it be the same percentage according to your analyses?
Was in charge of public safety, but as you know, that's not my portfolio. You would have to pose that question to my colleague Minister of Public Safety, and who's in charge of CBSA, who are in charge of removals.
Vous avez ajouté 50.
You added 50,000 new people to your staff to be able to deal with these demands and requests. I would like to know, how much time does it take to process a request on average when an illegal migrant crosses the border who is Francophone? How much time does it take to process their request? It can take several years, right? I would like to make an objection, Chair. 2 seconds, Renee. The objection is obvious because the minister and staff came here to talk about Francophone immigration, and I'm sorry, I have the floor. Mr. Bernier, please keep your question to Francophonie outside of Quebec and immigration, etc. Francophone immigration. I'd like to have a question on that. It's coming up. We can't hear it. In terms of Francophones and non-Francophones, people who have crossed the border irregularly, how many more do you expect to come between now and the rest of the year? And how many of them do you expect to be Francophone? This is out of order. I just want you to ask the minister about his presentation. We're doing a study on Francophone immigration. So your question seems to be rather broad in relation to our topic at hand today. So please make your question more specific so it relates to the Francophone community. So I will specify my question. I just want to know if the minister has anything to say about that.
I don't know what your question is. You talked about we put 50,000 people into something. I don't know what you're referring to.
50 personnes pour traiter des demandes de plus. Et je me demandais combien.
50 people more to process these requests.
Refugee Board?
Yeah.
Yes, so with the Immigration Refugee Board, part of Budget 2018 made a very important investment of $74 million for faster processing of refugee claims through the Immigration Refugee Board. What that will result in is 17,000 more refugee cases to be heard every year on top of the capacity of the IRB, which will lead to faster processing of asylum claims in under 12 months for those who are crossing the border irregularly. The reason for that is so that we can reach those decisions quickly. Those who have a legitimate claim for protection can stay, and the other ones can be removed.
Et en ce qui concerne nos amis francophones, il me reste encore une.
In terms of our Francophone question, friends, I think I have a minute left. New Brunswick would like to have 33% of Francophone requests. What are you going to do specifically to make sure that these two provinces will be able to reach their quota for Francophone immigrants in their province?
Aware of that target, and we encourage them with their target. We help them in every way that we can, beginning with signing an annex with the immigration agreement we made with New Brunswick. There was a separate annex for Francophone immigration. That's how focused we are on this issue. That means sharing information with them to better help attract Francophone immigrants to New Brunswick, using the Atlantic Immigration Pilot so that they can not only attract but retain French language speakers into the province. Expanding Study and Stay beyond Nova Scotia into all of the Atlantic provinces will help New Brunswick because they'll be able to keep more French-speaking international students, keep them in New Brunswick as permanent residents from places like Université de Moncton. So all those efforts will help more capacity and services for settlement service organizations to create a more welcoming community. And then the outreach. The outreach is really important. New Brunswick has been really good at joining the federal government in terms of outreach for more skilled immigrants from Francophone communities to come to Canada.
Merci beaucoup, Maxime. On va aller maintenant avec Randy Boissonneau.
Thank you, Maxime. Now we'll move on to Randy Boissonneau. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Minister, for coming today. And thank you for your close cooperation with the Francophone community here in Canada and abroad as well. You're a strong ally for Francophonie and for the LGBTQ community as well.
What were you most proud of with the express entry changes that have now doubled the numbers?
I was proud of the fact that we made the changes because we wanted to drive those numbers higher. We wanted to achieve an increase in the number of Francophone immigrants who are coming through the express entry system. And by making a small but necessary change in giving more points to applicants in the express entry system who demonstrate strong French language skills, just by making that one change in June of 2017, we have seen a doubling of the number of successful applicants who come through the express entry system who are Francophone. That's a huge point of pride for all of us because that's exactly what we wanted to achieve. And so if we can double that number in such a short period of time, we're hopeful that that trend will continue to go up and hopefully triple and quadruple.
It's excellent.
Yes, so, sorry.
No,
that's my basic answer.
Minister, I think that's great. Monsieur le Président, je pense que c'est une...
Chair, I think this is a real victory that we can all claim as a committee, given all the work we've done in Francophone immigration.
Were you happy to work with the department to get done on Francophone skilled workers and supports for Francophone immigrants across the country upon arrival? I noticed Pearson's part of it, but how do we expand that?
I think you start with Pearson because that's where the majority of Francophone newcomers are landing in Canada. So we have to get Pearson right, and we have to move on that very quickly. And now that with the new money in terms of the official languages plan, but there's also new money. And that's something that I really like to communicate to this committee. There's a lot of new money that has also come under the general envelope of settlement and integration. We have spent every successive year that we've been in government, we have increased the money that is available for settlement and integration programs for all newcomers. That, of course, includes Francophone newcomers. And we will make sure that that money goes to community groups to address your concerns, sir, and to make sure that they have not only the right programming, but the right capacity, and also the right people delivering the program. So we'll start with Pearson International Airport and move towards all the other landing zones to make sure that that first handoff is done, and that first reception of Francophone newcomers is done by a Francophone community service organization that delivers Francophone newcomer-oriented settlement services.
J'ai une question sur l'Alberta.
I have a question about Alberta. Yesterday, I was the Governor General for the Francophone Parliament of Alberta, and I gave royal assent. I gave the speech from the throne.
Minister, what are we doing with individual provinces that are looking to increase their Francophone numbers? We're going to 340 in 2020. I don't want to see the Francophone community in Alberta shrink.
I think when I went to Alberta to conduct ministerial roundtables on immigration, I had one in Calgary and another one in Edmonton. I heard, first of all, on the representation, we made sure that there were advocates in the room from the Francophone settlement community organizations and Francophone employers and so on. And we spoke about what more can we do. Well, one of the ideas that was brought forward was to open a second welcoming center, a second refugee assistance program welcoming center in Canada. There's only one in Winnipeg, so having a second one. Because as you know, many refugees who come to Canada are coming from Francophone, French-speaking countries. And so that is part of our approach to make sure that we also have a strategy for those people. The second one, which is really important, not just for Atlantic Canada, but for all of Canada, is international students. I was really disheartened recently when I had a meeting with about 26 leaders of the Canadian Arab community, and only one of them had heard of Mobilité Francophone. And they were all employers. So I pushed them hard, and I said, look, you have a great program called Mobilité Francophone. You come from countries, some of which are French-speaking. Could you please use this program? And they were very encouraged, but they didn't hear enough about it. So I speak often about these programs. I speak about the extra points in Express Entry. I speak about the Mobilité Francophone. I speak about the Atlantic Immigration Pilot Program. I speak about the Study and Stay. I speak about the Plan d'Action. I speak about the extra investments. I speak about Pour et Par. I speak about all of those things, but I think you are also ambassadors for this, and you should also speak about these opportunities, because that's what they are. They are opportunities. And I can tell you for a fact that one of the investments that was made in Alberta was made by a company precisely because they identified a bilingual community there. So we have our work to do, and we will continue to work towards those targets, but I think we've done a lot already, but it doesn't necessarily mean that people on the ground are aware of that progress.
Merci beaucoup, Randy. On va, même si le temps est écoulé, là.
Even though time's run out, I'll allow for 2 more questions. So one question for Sylvie and one for Francois. Sylvie, please go ahead. Thank you, Minister, for being here with us today. It's always a tremendous pleasure to speak about Francophonie and official language minority communities with you. You know that we are a non-partisan community here, and I'd like to be respected, even though I'm a conservative. And having said that, I'd like to now move on to my question. Now, it says 2015 to 2017, the number of Francophone immigrants under the provincial territorial nominee program has doubled and accounts for 38% of French-speaking immigrants under the economic class. Out of this 38% of French-speaking immigrants, what proportion of them now work in any of the Francophone provinces because they came in under the economic class? Do you have a percentage of those immigrants that have been placed in those provinces, and what proportion of that 38%?
Begin by putting on the record the fact that I respect all members of parliament regardless of party status. Secondly, we recognize the importance of economic immigration programs as a great tool for Canada to continue to grow our economy, to continue to address labor market challenges, to continue to address skills shortages, and yes, to continue to shore up the vitality of our Francophone communities outside of Quebec. That is why we increased our provincial nominee program allocation in our recent immigration plan by 33%, because we want to spread the benefits of immigration all across the country.
Monsieur le ministre.
On avait convenu, le temps est écoulé, ça fait que...
Well, time's run out. François, last question.
Président, et merci, Monsieur le ministre.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Minister. And we hope that the money does, in fact, reach those communities and is used both for and by these minority communities, and in this case, Francophones. I have a question about the immigration lottery program under the family class. It was changed to a lottery program, and it's faced a lot of criticism. So my question is about Francophones. Under a lottery system, as the Francophone family class, Francophone family class applicants, are they penalised? Is there a pool that of immigrants? And as a result, are Francophones a part of the same system, or are they just sidelined because of an Anglophone majority?
Parent system that we inherited, we felt was unfair. So we made 2 promises. We said we will double the number of the parent and grandparent allocation from 5,000 to 10,000. We've delivered. The second thing was that the previous system was unfair. If you were willing to spend more money than the next person, or pay a lot of money to an agent, or if you lived closer to the processing center, you would have more odds than the next person. That wasn't a fair system. So we introduced a fair system. In terms of the Francophone applicants, there's no discrimination against Francophone applicants under the parent-grandparent program.
Mais donc, ils
All
sont
applicants are
noyés
treated
dans...
the same.
Pardon, Monsieur le ministre. Mais donc...
Sorry, Minister, to cut you off. But do you mean that they just are lost in the system to the extent that... well, thank you very much, Francois. I'll have to cut you off.
And they have the same opportunity to sponsor their parent or grandparent like any other applicant.
Monsieur le ministre, avant de compléter, j'ai
Minister, before we wrap things up, I have a quick question myself. At this committee, we learned that the language tests that potential immigrants need to pass to come to Canada were actually developed in Paris. And we know that Paris, well, it's in France, it's another country, and et cetera, et cetera. So why isn't there a call for tenders launched in Canada to find someone who can develop a French language test here domestically in Canada, a Canadian-made test?
You actually read my mind, and thank you for reminding me of that point. There is an ongoing process. We're having a discussion with a second service provider, in addition to the one that exists right now, to provide those services, to make them more accessible, and to introduce competition into the field so that prices can come down for French language speakers to take the test.
Merci beaucoup.
And it's a Canadian company.
Oui.
It's a Canadian company.
OK, merci beaucoup, Monsieur le ministre, pour...
Thank you, Minister, for your appearance before the committee today. On behalf of all my colleagues, I think that you've shed a lot of light on our concerns and misgivings. Once again, thank you very much, and we'll suspend for a couple of minutes so that we can follow up with the other witnesses. Thank you. Okay, let's get started again. Second hour with the officials from the department. So we'll move on to a Q&A period right away, and we'll start with Sylvie Boucher. Hello, good afternoon, welcome. I have two straightforward questions that have already been asked that we haven't had time to get an answer to for X, Y, or Z reason. And the first is regarding this 38% from 2015 to 2017 of provincial and territorial immigrants who are French-speaking under the economic class. What proportion of those applicants and immigrants now actually work in French in provinces where there are Francophone minority communities? Number one. Number two, this French-made language test made in Paris, and we learned that it cost twice as much to sit as the English test, which to our mind is absolutely nonsensical. And what we want to know in relation to that is why is it that Canada, and I'm talking about all levels of government, never thought of designing a Canada-made, homemade test? Because we have our own French Canadian expressions, and it's so many years ago in my writing office, somebody offered to develop a French language test, so they're my two questions. Number one, 38% of French-speaking immigrants from 2015 to 2017. How many of them actually work in provinces in French, in minority language communities? And second question regarding the test. Thank you very much, Madame Boucher, for your question. We have specific data about the number of folks who actually work in the province where they were initially landed. And these figures are available under our taxation databases, and we can put together those figures for you. We don't have any in-depth information on the number of people who work actually in French. We're not the kind of society that collects that kind of information. You know, if someone works in French or English, they have no obligation to report that to the government. So we can't tell you exactly how many people actually work in French and what proportion of their day is spent working in French. But we do have data on the number of newcomers that are still working in the province in which they initially landed. And the vast majority of those who came through the provincial nominee program have remained in the province in which they landed. Question, if I've understood correctly, out of the 38% of French-speaking immigrants under the economic class, you're telling me that we don't even know what percentage of those immigrants actually work in French because the data is not available? Response, yeah, that kind of data just doesn't quite simply exist. And I would have trouble understanding how a society like Canada would justify collecting that kind of data. Question, regarding the test that was designed in Paris, based on what the Minister said, there's a call for tenders that's been launched to develop a Canadian-made test. Response, this is a major international multinationals that have developed language tests for many purposes, for university admission, etc., etc. And we've been looking for quite some time. We do have language tests in Canada, but there was, in the past, there's been no company that's offered to do so, except for the Chamber of Commerce or the Board of Trade in Paris that is able to offer that service worldwide and meet our needs. So currently the department is completing negotiations with a Canadian company to design a French language test, and I'm assuming that we will sign off on a contract in short order, and our systems will be updated to accommodate that. Question, is it going to cost the same amount to sit the test in French as it will in English? responsible. Everything points to the fact that any tests set for domestically in Canada will be of a comparable price. But the test cost varies from country to country. But the request for sitting for the English test as English language test is there's far more people who apply to do that.
Darrell.
Daryl. Microphone, please. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your presentation, for your information. First, I'd like to congratulate you. I don't flatter witnesses every day, but at least last year you were listening to us. We were very frustrated here around the table last year. We were frustrated with the lack of success, and data was unacceptable. And we had to see major changes, and now we are seeing them. So this is quite interesting. First, I'd like to continue on with the question that Mr. Choquette was asking about the lottery. I'd like to share a story with you very quickly, and I'll give you the answer that I'd like you to include in your strategy. 30 years ago, when I started in teaching, I taught in an Anglophone community, and then there were 4 Acadians that had lost their French. And so I encouraged them to speak French and to make a demand for a summer grant to learn French. All 4 made a request, but none of them received the grant because 4% of the population in Nova Scotia was Francophone, and so there's more chance of pulling out Anglophone names. And Francophones weren't able to obtain money to learn French, and Anglophones did. So we had 2 programs, as my friend mentioned. I'm not telling you that you have to create 2 programs, but what I am saying is that you need a target that's at least 4.4%. So once we've looked at 80%, we have to stop. We have to look how many Francophone names were pulled out. Oh, 2.4%. We're missing another 2%. So next we're going to pull 2% that will be Francophones to make sure we get the 2 or 8%. Then you can say not only we have a lottery system, but one that is aligned with our 4.4% target. So that's my suggestion. I hope you'll be able to apply it tomorrow morning. Another question I have is also very important. We really have to be careful because the minister spoke about it earlier. We're spending money on welcoming Francophone communities by and for the province, but some provinces do a better job than others, and Nova Scotia, they do a rather good job. But we're putting money into this to welcome immigration and for integration. But in terms of the economy and work, the money is not targeted or earmarked in Nova Scotia. For example, Red Day in the other provinces, Red Day is the network for Francophones. And in Nova Scotia, there's a Council for Economic Development, and they are specialists in employment. So they should be getting the money. In terms of employability, they really need to receive funding. And we've already made a request for a position, but we weren't able to receive it. So we hope that will be accepted. And my last question in terms of the annexes, which I really love, I was able to meet with the various ministers across Canada, and what we prepared for New Brunswick and Ontario, do we intend to also discuss with ministers of other provinces to develop annexes to the agreement as well? Thank you very much, Mr. Sanson. I'm not sure I heard a question about your first two, except for the recommendations that you're making. But my question is, do you agree with me? Yes. Well, if so, your answer is easy. If personally, your first question is no, the second question is yes, and third is yes. Those are my answers. And about the third question, do we discuss this regularly with other provinces, and do we encourage them to follow the example of Ontario and Brunswick? Absolutely, yes. And my colleague, that's his, Mr. Jenny, that's his daily work. About your second question, yes, the funding that is invested for the program by and for, it is established. We use partnerships to use this money in coordination with associations. In Nova Scotia, yeah, they really need to look at this. The first question about the lottery. If you said no, but it's not up to me to establish the government's policy on that. I'm just saying that the current policy for family reunification is blind to this. There is no bias to any race or any people or linguistic profile. When someone wants to sponsor their partner, their husband, their child, the system gives them the same opportunity. Everyone has the same opportunity, regardless of their profile. So this system is failing. We need one that will guarantee this. Thank you, Daryl. Francois. Thank you, Chair. In terms of the targets, earlier we mentioned that there was some criticism from the communities about the plan. I have it here. As I mentioned, there's no timetable for these targets. Yes, we have targets, but in terms of the implementation or the realization of these targets, there's no timetable. We don't know. Are you going to have timelines? I'll ask my colleague, Mr. Denis, to answer this. In terms of the Government of Canada's program, yes, we do have a timetable for the 4.4%. Well, provinces, that's not federal jurisdiction. It's up to them. Mr. Denis can tell you more. Thank you very much. As mentioned, every jurisdiction can confirm their own targets. On the federal level, regardless of what the jurisdictions are doing, we do have our own targets. We have confirmed them. And as to the implementation of the plan, if you look at the jurisdictions and the three strategies, one of the concrete steps that are being taken is we have performance indicators. And this is very important to make sure that we're not just taking action, but we're also evaluating our progress throughout the process. So these are ministers' agreements. So yes, you do have timetables for these indicators. Yes, every time the Francophone ministers get together, they do discuss this. Sorry to interrupt you, Mr. Denny, but we don't have much time. Are you going to make these timelines available to the committee? Because we're not aware of such timelines. Yes, we can confirm our expectations as we confirmed at this symposium as well. Thank you very much, Mr. Denis. Another question I have is about, well, we've talked about the target, the 4.4% for 2018. What are the most recent figures? 2017, what was the national rate that we achieved that year for Francophone immigration outside of Quebec? Yes, I do have the figures here with me. It's roughly 2%. The bar was really high, huh? For the 4.4%, the bar's high. I don't think we'll be able to achieve this target for 2018. For 2018, probably no. What provinces need the most support? It's probably the provinces that are succeeding better. It's not necessarily just their fault, but some are doing well, but others need more support. Do you evaluate this in the support you provide to the provinces? We do direct support to the committees with a federal integration fund with community organizations. The Canadian integration program is community-based. So there are 500 service providers for integration, 50 of which are Francophone. The coordination with the provinces is done for those that we want to work closely with provinces when they have specific targets. And right now, all provinces don't have targets in this area. So the government can't force them to have targets, but we do encourage them. And provinces such as New Brunswick and Ontario, we work with them closer because they do have specific targets they want to reach. Provinces have annexes that you've mentioned, and we've lauded them greatly, and New Brunswick and Ontario have them. Do you plan to seek annexes with other provinces as well? Does this create issues with provincial governments? Why don't other provinces have them? Just wanted to confirm that promoting Francophone immigration is a priority for all provinces and territories. It's part of the minister's agreements. But as my colleague mentioned, they all have their own priorities and abilities. On the federal level, we're ready to support provinces throughout our programs, and they can make their own decisions as to what actions they want to make for their plan. So we offer to establish agreements with all provinces for Francophone immigration, but it's not the only mechanism that is available. We also have our action plan. We heard the minister say earlier that he met with communities in minority settings, Francophone minority settings, but without doing an ATIP, can we have a list of community people, representatives that he met with? Could we have this list, or do we have to do a ATIP request? Yes, I think we can provide you with that list. Perfect. Thank you. Do I have any time left, Chair? No, your time is up. Thank you. Thank you very much, Francois. Next is Renee. Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you for being here today. Of course, I could flatter the department because you've really made a major change for Francophone immigration. But when we ask questions, we really want to fill gaps. I don't want to be negative, but to go back to what Daryl said, the previous government and the one before it, in terms of Francophone immigration, outside of Quebec, the word failure is a euphemism. There has been a total failure. So I tell you this because not only do we have to achieve our target, but we have to go beyond it. We have to go beyond it because there's a real deficit in Francophone immigration. Do you agree with what I just said? Yes. Is the department aware of it? Is just want a yes or a no? Is the department aware of this deficit in Francophone immigration over the past few years? The department, yes. I think my minister has mentioned several times that, yes, he wants to exceed the target. But I want the bureaucrats to be aware of this. I know the minister knows it, but it's at the rung below that they need to know. I can't speak for my colleagues at the department, but I just keep passing the message along indirectly. What I wanted to say, the famous lottery that we were mentioning earlier, I know that you said that you don't discriminate based on origin, gender, country, religion, race. I understand all that, except in Canada. Canada was built on the theory of founding peoples. In our charter, this is mentioned, as is the Official Languages Act. We also mention it there. So when we have a lottery, we have to make sure we recommend the 4.4% target, because they have to make sure they speak one of the two official languages and one of the founding partner languages. Certainly, for the first time, the current government has created selection tools to give an advantage to Francophones. For the time being, we have not implemented a policy that favors Francophones for family unification. If you sponsor your spouse, your children, we are going to can't favor one group over another. If we can succeed in attracting economic immigrants, the 4.4% or target or more will naturally tend to see people sponsoring their parents and grandparents. But right now, if you tell a Canadian you can sponsor your spouse and the other person can't, until now, no government, to the best of my knowledge, has studied this. I know no government has thought about this, but I think we have to think about it now. That's my opinion, and I think the committee would agree. Can we look at this possibility? Well, of course, we have to stay open and transparent, and we don't want to discriminate. But in terms of selecting immigrants with 2 official languages, one of the 2, we have to make sure that this 4.4 rate is for Francophones outside of Quebec is reached. But can we look at that? It's possible to look at it, but I cannot speak for the government on this. Okay. The spouses represent the large part in the family category. Can you favor this type of logic that I mentioned? Myself? No. Okay. Because family reunification, well, I'll give you my personal opinion. To the best of my knowledge, and I've worked at the department for quite some time, no government has ever considered the possibility of limiting family reunification based on other priorities, except any other priorities except for family links, family ties. 1 minute. So in terms of the famous hub, this is a parallel type of center, and we'll have personnel, Francophone personnel. We're going to maximize Francophone immigration. Did I understand that correctly? And I have a suggestion. If possible, it would be nice and, of course, effective to make sure that the personnel that is selected for this hub come within the department, or should we hire people from Francophone communities outside of Quebec? And, of course, you'll find real champions there. That's just a suggestion I have for you. And in terms of Francophone communities outside of Quebec, it would be good to retain Francophones if we had real champions for the cause. So thank you very much for your attention. Mr. Vandal. Thank you very much. A couple of questions. 6 weeks ago, roughly, we unveiled the Official Languages Action Plan that goes up to 2023. And I think there's several million over 5 years. And on March 2nd, we unveiled the Federal Provincial Territorial Action Plan to boost Francophone immigration. Are they the same objectives in the 2 plans? Can you explain how the 2 plans go hand in hand, or how they're organized? I'll ask my colleague Corinne to speak to that because she's been working on the file directly. But the objectives are the same. There is a concentration and increase in the strategies in terms of the money that is earmarked for Francophone immigration. We want to emphasize integration for and by Francophones. In the past, we focused almost all our efforts on promotion and recruitment. And we learned over the years, to use a euphemism, that this wasn't really a big success. So we absolutely have to continue our promotion and recruitment efforts. Since we've had promising results with the express entry system, we have to keep on filling up this basin with new candidates, a pool of new candidates. So we want them to stay in the community, and we want them to be in Montreal 2 years later. So that's the focus of our efforts in the plan for the coming years. We really want to work with this funding to build a pathway for and by Francophones. Are you working on retention? With the Official Languages Action Plan and the FPT plan? The two plans go hand in hand. Naturally, the coordination plan with the provinces and territories, the provinces and territories obviously want to keep immigrants in their province, in their region. Yes, do you have anything to add to that?
In the FPT Action Plan 2018-2023, there is a component on settlement. And in the Official Languages Action Plan 2018-2023 that Minister Joly recently released, our department will receive funding for settlement services. The two plans are targeted, especially for settlement, but under the Federal Official Languages Action Plan, there are three components that our departments, under which our department will receive funding. The first of which is to enhance the capacity of the settlement sector. The second is to create welcoming communities in order to respond to the retention issues that you raised earlier. Thirdly, is to provide customized or tailored language training. So both plans are targeted, especially the settlement plan. Response. I know that there was a strategic plan for growth in the Atlantic provinces. There was a retention immigration strategy, I believe. Are there any best practices that have come out of that experience that could be applied to the Official Languages communities? It's far too early to assess the Atlantic pilot. It's just got started, so we don't have enough data at our disposal. But it's a really important trial. The notion behind it is to enhance retention by developing an integration plan even before the immigrant lands in coordination with the employer. And that's a very important concept for Francophone communities. Most of our settlement integration programs have nothing to do with retention. And in Toronto and in Vancouver, those services are different and separate. So I think that to work together with the communities and the service providers prior to the arrival of the new immigrants, well, that's what's happening under the Atlantic Pilot Program, and that will provide for a pathway for Francophone immigrants. Thank you. Leonard, two quick questions.
The Stay and Study program, or the Study and Stay, is it for high school students as well? Because there are high school students in my riding that are studying in French immersion. I wondered if it applies to them. And secondly, would you consider the fact that the French test is considerably more expensive than the English test as being somewhat discriminatory and unfair in a process where we're looking to make it more fair?
I'm afraid with regard to Study and Stay in the Atlantic provinces, I don't think it applies to high school students, but I will check to be sure. These are transition programs being developed by the provinces, so they may not be identical one to another. So we'd have to check on that. That's not my area of responsibility. With regard to the cost of French language tests, no one in the department is happy that the English tests have been less expensive in the past. The challenge is very big. The number of principal applicants who take these tests, which are only required in our economic programs, are several thousand per year. To provide those at hundreds of locations in Canada and globally.
But should they not be subsidized by the government to ensure that the access is the same regardless of language?
We've looked at all such models, but you can see if you want them to be provided in a lot of places for a reasonable cost, you want to work with an organization that does such language testing for multiple purposes so you can make it economically viable. The government could set up language tests globally and run them ourselves with civil servants, but that would be extraordinarily expensive, and we don't feel we could begin to match the coverage of organizations like La Chambre de Commerce de Paris, who work in the lycée system globally and in French cultural systems globally. We are delighted to now be working with a Canadian organization which will introduce more competition into this field.
Merci, Léonard. Bernard Généreux.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you, witnesses. If I've understood correctly what you said, sir, and I'll borrow the expression my colleague used, in the past we have failed. We haven't been successful in providing a successful framework. He said more than that, but there'll be about 60 million in addition to the 40 million to fund your services. And I'd like to hear from the horse's mouth what the starting point will be and what will happen in 5 years. This is a total envelope over 5 years for Francophone immigration. What are the criteria that have been set out at the outset so that in 5 years' time we can say that we have really met our objectives? How are we going to measure that vis-a-vis the goals that we've set at the outset? Secondly, the money is to increase the capacity of Francophone settlement services. What does that mean? Does that mean additional staff? Does that mean people on the ground? Does it mean more officials and public servants here in Ottawa? Where's the accountability there? How, as committee members, because we hope we'll be here in 5 years' time and re-elected, how are we going to evaluate the progress over the past 5 years? We're going to draw a line in the sand now and not go back 20 years in the past. We're going to start from now at the starting point.
Grande question and question complexe.
That's a very far-reaching and complicated question you've asked. Currently, we have $29 million annually for the Francophone immigration pilot project, and we're going to get an increase of about a third, $5 million for the fiscal 2018 and then 2019, and then $10 million annually thereafter. And so it'll go from $30 million to $40 million with an additional $10 million annually. The vast majority of this funding, $36 million of the $40 million over 5 years, will go to the communities and the service providers. Now, what I mean by that is language training and the bridge between landing and employment, community integration services, etc., that are provided by service providers at a grassroots level in the community. Well, will that be successful? Success will be determined by the progress made in terms of reaching the 4.4% target, and by determining whether the vast majority of these new immigrants remain in the communities. Question, do you have any kind of table or in terms of, or dashboard in terms of how we're going to meet this 4.4%, given that we are only at about 2%? Originally, the target was 5%, then it was dropped to 4.4%, so it's going down and down and down. I don't think that there was ever a 5%. Why am I thinking 5%? Oh, perhaps that was in Ontario that there was a 5% target. Anyway, regardless of that, I would like there to be some kind of a framework, or rather a benchmark, some kind of yardstick. Well, there will be a yardstick in order to measure progress in achieving this target. And we'll be able to detail the performance of our integration programs in retaining immigrants. I can't give you any table or spreadsheet right now, but I can put one together. Well, you see what I'm getting at. We need some level of accountability, both by subcontractors. These subcontractors provide services, and we know how that works. If we had a performance table, some barely get the passing grade, some excel, some kind of average. But in order to really assess the performance of these service providers, well, that's one thing. But my fear is, I'll admit, when it comes to fresh money, a lot ends up staying here in Ottawa and not getting out to the communities. So what proportion of this fresh money over the upcoming 5 years, what percentage is earmarked for Ottawa? And, well, who will be ensuring that those monies are actually divvied up and go out to the communities? Where will the buck stop? 90%, as I said earlier, will go to the communities. There will be money that will stay here in Ottawa. And I think for good reason, and reasons that you've already alluded to. We want full-time, dedicated staff to coordinate with the provinces, evaluate the program, document outcomes, conduct research, organise employment fairs worldwide, and to coordinate these activities. There will be monies that will stay in Ottawa, but 90% will go to the grants and contributions program, and we meet our objectives through those. Through that. Linda Lapointe, 4 minutes. Well, officially, the committee is calling on the department to provide some level of accountability, yardsticks, as to how the money will be spent over the upcoming 5 years. Response? No problem. We'll make sure that happens. Well, actually, I don't quite have a handle on what you're wanting. It's tough to answer your question because I'm not quite certain of what you're looking for when you say tableau de bord or... Well, in fact, it's in relation. My question is in relation to the document that Francois is holding up. There needs to be some level of accountability vis-a-vis these objectives. You have an objective at the outset, but you know, in 5 years' time, how are you going to determine whether this is a success or not? There needs to be yardsticks, benchmarks over the next 5 years, and then after 5 years, you should be able to submit a report with measurable outcomes and goals that you yourself have set. And it's not, the onus isn't on us to set those goals. Of course, we have a performance framework for the program, and we'll be reporting back to the committee. Could you please, says the chair, table the performance framework with the clerk so that we can circulate it amongst committee members? Response, of course. Of course I can, Mr. Chair. Sorry, I didn't understand. I don't quite have a handle on the question. The Chair, you have a performance framework in-house. So there's a 5-year timeline. We should be able to measure the progress over the 5 years. So you have a performance framework. Could you table the performance framework with the clerk? Yes, I can. Thank you so much. Linda Lapointe, thank you very much for being here with us today. I wasn't here for the Minister's remarks, but this is interesting. We have 4.4% target that we haven't met, and earlier a colleague asked which provinces had actually reached this target, which haven't. I don't think that there was a clear answer as to which provinces are doing better than others. And you said that the federal government can't force the provinces to do anything, but under these agreements, they can be encouraged to do so. Now, under the economic program, let's say you take a look at the various best practices of the provinces. Some have better best practices than others. But which provinces should be a role model that other provinces could emulate? I think it'd be a good idea if we can agree on which province has the best practices so that other provinces can follow suit and emulate those best practices. Response. Well, of course, sharing best practices is part of our formal plan that the FPT have developed. Question. Some provinces are succeeding better in meeting targets than others. Which are they? Response. Well, these targets were developed very recently, and I think for Ontario it was about a year ago. So, question. Has Ontario meeting its target? Response. The provincial targets are under their provincial nominee programs because they're the ones that have, that's their bailiwick. It's within their purview. And the Ontario target is 5% of their provincial nominees that are French-speaking. And I don't think we have any data on that yet. So the 4.4% in 2018, we won't reach it, but it'll maybe in 2020. But surely you've done projections. Can't you tell us which province has the best practices? Well, the province with the best practices? What I just said, Madam, was that these provinces only recently developed their targets. So we can't really tell you with any certainty which province is succeeding the best. But the program that's very promising is the Express Entry program. And apparently, under that program, there's been a doubling of the number of French-speaking applicants under that program, and that's very promising. Now, as a rule of thumb, the provinces work very closely with their grassroots communities, especially in New Brunswick, as you can imagine. They link up the employers with vacant positions as part of international recruitment programs, and we work very closely with our overseas missions and embassies, etc. And sharing best practices is, in fact, a formal prong of the FPT action plan. Let me give you an example of a best practice. On Ontario, well, Ontario developed Destination Ontario last year. And the Atlantic provinces last year set up a Acadia destination program, which is akin to the federal program. And it's a good role model for the other provinces. François Choquette, 2 minutes. Well, I have 2 minutes. I think we've covered this issue more or less, but I'd like to come back to what Mr. Généreux just said. As I said from the outset, the action plan, FPT action plan, to increase Francophone immigration outside Quebec in minority settings, well, it's promising because when the very first time the minister appeared, we were calling for that. And now we see that suddenly we have this that's come to fruition, and this is a step in the right direction. We still have our work cut out for us, but you said, sir, that you have to develop performance indicators. But that's what we're particularly interested in, those indicators, and what your yardsticks and objectives will be for next year and 2020 and going forward. That way, the committee will be able to monitor your progress. Now, what's a bit of a pity to my mind is this Francophone ombudsman. We want a dedicated section for Francophone immigration in minority settings. Oh, the hub. The hub, in some ways, will meet those needs. And Mr. Arsenault also said that we want more than just a hub. We want an entire branch of the department to focus its work on Francophone immigration. Now, 2% next year, and yet the bare minimum is 4.4%, just to maintain the status quo from a demographic standpoint. And yet, Francophones are becoming fewer and fewer in number, and we'll see the ramifications on the vitality of our Francophone communities. That's more of a general comment that I wanted to make, it's not so much a question. Well, thank you very much. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you, gentlemen, Mr. Manicom, Madame Prince, Mr. Denis, and just a reminder to members of the committee, just before we adjourn the meeting, we'll be tabling a report tomorrow on early childhood at 10 a.m. tomorrow in the House of Commons, followed by a press conference at 1:30 p.m. in the foyer of the House of Commons. So, of course, everyone's invited to take part in those two events tomorrow. Now, on Wednesday, we'll pick up where we left off on the media report. Thank you so much.